You're standing with the people, working together, united. I see a land filled with hope again. Fear falls away as the brave step forward to join the ranks. You're a hero, a symbol for a better world. Our world.
In our last episode, we explored the epilogue after siding with the Brotherhood. Now it's time to go back in time, to the point in the Institute when we chose which faction to side with. And this time, with only one faction remaining, it's time to side with the Minutemen. To get to this point, we had to work with the Minutemen to build the signal interceptor. This involved first rescuing Preston Garvey and the refugees from the Museum of Freedom and escorting them to Sanctuary.
Well, I'll be damned. It's the monument to the original Minutemen. I knew that was somewhere around Concord. That means this right here must be the Old North Bridge, where the first shots of the American Revolution were fired. I'd call that the best omen I've seen since we left Quincy.
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, boss, but I'm glad you're happy about it.
Then, as we explored in my video where we built the signal interceptor with the Minutemen, we had to work with Preston Garvey to defend a nearby settlement, in my case, Ten Pines Bluff.
Take it easy. I'm with the Minutemen. I'm here to help.
You're with the Minutemen? I didn't really think you fellas still existed. You find those raiders?
They're history. Now, what do you say about joining the Minutemen?
We're in. You can count on us if you need help down the line.
Whereupon, if successful, Preston Garvey asks us to become General of the Minutemen.
We need someone who can bring the whole Commonwealth together in a common cause. And I think you've got it in you to be that leader.
Mr. Garvey is quite right, sir. If anyone can unite the people, it's you.
Okay, I'll do it.
That's the spirit, sir, and one giant step in the right direction for the Commonwealth.
Good. Welcome aboard. Don't worry. I'll be right beside you all the way, General.
Once we accept, we officially join the Minutemen faction as their leader, and we can build the signal interceptor with them.
Oh, by the way, I figured this was a golden opportunity to find out as much as we can about the Institute and what they're up to. Yeah, this holotape's all set with a program that will scan their network and download anything it finds. Hold on to your butt!
Once in the Institute, we have to complete a task for Father before we get the ability to teleport in and out of the Institute. To accomplish this, we check in with the heads of the major departments of the Institute, and then Madison Lee upgrades our Pip-Boy to allow us to teleport in and out. While here we can explore the abandoned FEV lab to acquire the experimental FEV cure for Virgil. Then we load our network scanner into any Institute terminal to download Institute data for Sturgis. Once done, we check in with Father, and we can now teleport out. We can then adopt the attire of a Minuteman soldier. There was the body of a dead Minuteman soldier outside the Museum of Freedom in Concord, and from his corpse we can get a Minuteman outfit and the Minutemen's signature laser musket. The laser musket is a powerful but cumbersome weapon. Instead of reloading fusion cells like other laser weapons, the weapon needs to be cranked after each shot. The cranking can take a while, which makes it awkward to use in combat, but the capacitor of the laser musket can be upgraded. If we upgrade the capacitor to be a 3, 4, 5 crank capacitor, we can actually force the energy of multiple fusion cells into each shot. dramatically increasing each shot's power. This makes the laser musket an exceptional sniper's weapon. Coupled with longer barrels and a scope, it can outperform almost any other sniper rifle. But in mid to short range, it's a cumbersome weapon to use. Now, there is a variation of this weapon that doesn't require it being cranked before every single shot, but we won't stumble upon it until much later. To continue siding with the Minutemen, we head back to Sanctuary Hills, and we give the network scanner full of Institute data to Sturgis.
Here's that holotape you gave me, full of Institute data. I hope.
Well, all right. I'll start digging into this and see if I can make heads or tails of it.
What do you hope to find?
Whatever the Institute doesn't want anybody to know.
So this was just a fishing expedition?
There wasn't any way to know ahead of time what might be on their network. So I just had that program set to grab everything it found.
There's probably nothing useful on there anyway.
No way to tell until I take a look.
The Institute isn't our enemy, remember?
I know, but it never hurts to be prepared. Just in case they decide the Commonwealth isn't big enough for the both of us. All the good stuff on here is going to be encrypted. So the first job is to see if I can crack it. After that, well, I'll have to see what I've got. There's no telling what we might have grabbed off their mainframe.
Now, the story of the Minutemen is the story of the settlement system in Fallout 4. Up until this point, we could pretty much have ignored it. We didn't have to use the settlement building system to work with any other faction, except for siding with the railroad and creating a Mercer safe house for them, and except for crafting the limb actuators for the Brotherhood. But the Minutemen are all about creating safe havens for everyday settlers in the wasteland. And so their story is all about rebuilding the wasteland. Thus, before we can go very far in the Minutemen's story, we have to actively work on building settlements. This story is unique and individualized for every single player. No two settlements we build will ever be the same. The order in which we get settlements is different from playthrough to playthrough, so this part is highly individualized. To continue the story, I'll be telling the story of how I chose to rebuild the wasteland. When we left Sanctuary Hills after building the signal interceptor, we left Sturgis hanging. He wanted us to give Sanctuary everything it needed. Before we could get him to build the signal interceptor, we at least had to put down beds, which we did.
Well, for starters, we could use some real beds.
But once done with that, Sturgis next asks us to create a safe water supply.
I like it. Having a place to sleep will improve everyone's spirits. What we need now is a reliable source of clean water.
To do that, we access the water pump in the settlement build system and find a place for it. Each water pump produces 3 water. Next, he asks us to produce some food for the settlement.
I feel better already, knowing we have a reliable supply of clean water. I hope you don't mind me asking for some more help, but our food supplies are running low. If we're gonna settle here, we'll need to get some crops established.
What kind of crops are you looking for?
It doesn't much matter.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Oh, potatoes, mute fruit, corn, whatever you can get to grow.
I doubt anything will grow around here.
Oh, you'd be surprised. I'm no farmer, but I've seen people growing crops in much less promising spots than this.
I'll start planting right away.
Good deal.
To do this, we plant some food. Most of the crops only produce half a food each, but the mute fruit plant produces 1 whole food each. Once the crops are planted, we then have to assign a settler to farm the crop. Each settler can farm a total of 6 food, so either 6 mute fruit plants or 12 other plants, or a combination of the two.
Do you have a moment? I wanted to thank you for helping us out in Concord. If only we'd run into you sooner.
What happened to you guys?
Long story short, we've been on the move since the attack on Quincy. There used to be more of us.
It all worked out in the end.
No. Our problems aren't so simple.
You got lucky. But I think your luck's run out.
You think we don't know that? Look at us. We're barely keeping it together. We've been through hell.
Don't mention it. You guys have been through hell, huh?
You have no idea. In these past few months, we've lost everything. My son, he's gone.
Your son. What was his name?
Kyle. My son's name was Kyle.
That's awful. No parent should have to lose their child.
No, they shouldn't. I just keep thinking, maybe I could have done more. Anyway, thanks again.
You were his dad. It was your job to protect him. You failed.
Don't you dare touch me. You don't know what happened. I did everything I could, but those damn raiders... I hope they suffer for what they did.
I understand how you feel. I lost someone too.
But you and I, we're still here, right? We have to go on. For them.
One of the wonderful things about building settlements is that some of the settlements come with settlers who have their own stories. We'll stumble upon more of them later in this series. June and his wife, Marcy Long, lost their son, Kyle, while they were fleeing the gunner attacks at Quincy. I covered their story in a video I published many years ago called The Long Walk. But back to Sturgis. Finally, Sturgis asks us to build some defense.
Well, this place is starting to feel like home. Now that we can grow our own food, I think we can really make a go with this. Trouble is, the more we establish ourselves here, the more of a target we become. What we need is to get some defenses set up. Then maybe Preston will be able to relax a little bit.
What sort of defenses did you have in mind?
Walls, sandbags, turrets, whatever you can put together.
I'll get to it when I have time.
Well, okay. The sooner the better, though.
Seems like I've done enough for you already.
I thought you wanted to help.
I'm on it.
Thanks. It'll make everyone feel more secure here.
Opening up the settlement build menu, we find a number of options. The first is to build a guard tower, and the guard tower comes in two varieties. But once placed, the guard tower doesn't start producing defense until we assign a settler to it. Each assigned settler to a guard tower will produce 2 defense. If we have multiple guard towers in our settlement, the settler assigned to a guard tower will periodically wander between the guard towers. However, in order to actually get more defense, we have to assign more settlers to each individual guard tower. So to maximize the amount of defense we get from guard towers, we have to have a settler assigned to each guard tower. Our other options are to create turrets and traps. I think traps are mostly useless, but turrets are good. They consume resources to produce, so we have to scavenge for scrap, but they don't need to be manned, and they produce more settlement defense than each individual guard tower. So turrets are great for amping up the defense level of a settlement that's small and has few people. Once done, we can check in with Sturgis.
Thanks for doing that. We'll all sleep better at night knowing we have some defenses set up. It's been a long road. But yeah, I think this is it. Home. Feels good.
What next?
Well, I guess figuring out how to get back to living, instead of just surviving.
A home for you, maybe.
Give it some time. It's your home, too, if you want it to be.
This'll never be my home.
That's too bad. Maybe one day you'll feel differently.
I was glad to help.
Well, I appreciate it. Of course, you know you're welcome anytime. My door's always open to you. Windows, too. Some of the walls actually come to think of it. I guess I better get back to it. Take care now.
And we complete the quest, Sanctuary. This is the only tutorial to the settlement system that we have, and it barely scratches the surface. It doesn't tell us everything we need to know, which can make settlement building really frustrating, because there's a lot that we need to know that the game just never tells us. We'll get into that in just a bit. But first, now that we're the general of the Minutemen, Preston Garvey will periodically come to us and tell us of a settlement that needs help.
I've got something a bit different for you. Our scouts have found a promising spot for a new settlement. The trouble is that some kind of vicious beasts are lairing there. Once you clear it out, set up a radio beacon to let settlers know about it. Before you know it, we'll have a thriving new farm instead of wasteland. We'll take back the Commonwealth, one piece at a time.
This starts the Radiant quest, Taking Point. Preston will randomly select an abandoned settlement nearby that we need to go claim for the Minutemen. And the bulk of the Minutemen's quests are Radiant quests like this. In addition to Taking Point, we can get the Radiant quest, Clearing the Way.
We could really use your help.
I'm with the Minutemen. How can I help?
We've got a nest of some nasty bugs around the corner. If they don't get cleaned out soon, we're gonna have a real problem. What's really too bad is it'd be a nice spot for a new settlement. In fact, I know some folks that'd love to set up there if it was safe. If you can make sure the old workshop there is still in one piece, anyone who decides to move in later will be able to rebuild.
Where is this place?
We have a pretty good idea. I hope you can find them and wipe them out.
Or the quest, Ghoul Problem.
Am I ever glad to see you? We could really use a hand.
The Minutemen are always happy to help. What did you need?
A pack of feral ghouls have holed up nearby, and some of them have started wandering out lately. If more of them start wandering out this way, we may be overrun. We need someone to clear them out.
I'm on it. It's as good as done.
I'll be glad to have them gone.
Or Raider Troubles.
Did the Minutemen send you?
Yes, I'm here to help. What's going on?
There's a group of raiders that won't leave us alone, stealing our food and supplies, threatening us if we can't give them what they want. We know where they're coming from, but we can't stand up to them ourselves.
Don't worry. I'll take care of those raiders for you.
I hope so. We didn't know what to do.
Or Greenskins.
Hey there, friend. We're in some real trouble. Maybe you can help.
I'm with the Minutemen. How can I help?
It's these damn greenskins. The super mutants. Whenever they come through, we just have to run away or hide. They take everything they can eat and destroy most everything else. And if they ever took us by surprise, we'd all be dead. We can't live like this. Please, you gotta help us.
I'll take care of those super mutants. I promise.
I hope so. We didn't know what to do.
Or Kidnapping.
You've gotta help. They've kidnapped my friend.
You're in luck. Rescuing kidnap victims is my specialty.
They said they'd be back for the ransom in a few days. If I don't pay up, they'll kill her. But I don't have that kind of money.
In this case, we could pay the ransom.
Here's the ransom. Pay them when they come back.
Oh, okay, thanks. I just hope I can trust those raiders to keep their promise.
Or we can agree to retrieve the kidnapped settler.
I'll teach those bastards a lesson they'll never forget.
We asked the Minutemen for help, but I didn't really think anyone would come. Just bring her back safe, okay?
Each of these quests will grant us a new settlement upon completion. Each quest is nearly identical, with slight variations. Sometimes we have to clear a place of super mutants, in the case of greenskins, or ghouls, in the case of Ghoul Problem. Sometimes we have to rescue a kidnapped settler, in the case of kidnapping, or kill a bunch of raiders, like in Raider Troubles, or Stop the Raiding. One of these Radiant quests will actually grant us access to 2 new settlements, and that's Clearing the Way. In that quest, we clear the way for settlers to settle a nearby settlement, whereupon we get that settlement as ours, and when we go back to the people who gave us the quest, we get their settlement as well.
You back? Any luck clearing out that trouble spot?
I cleared that place out for you. Should be safe for your friends to move in now.
Nice to have some good news around here for a change. By the way, we've decided to support the Minutemen. We've got to help each other if we want things to get better.
I found that Preston doesn't like to clutter up our quest log too much, so we'll have 2, maybe 3 of these active in our quest log at any given time. To get more, we have to complete the ones he's already given us. In this way, settlement by settlement, we begin to rebuild the Minutemen. And we begin to see the benefits of this almost immediately. While exploring from settlement to settlement, we'll periodically see a group of Minutemen patrolling. They'll either be securing the road just outside or wandering around the interior of the settlement. And finally, our flare gun is actually useful. Back when we first joined the Minutemen, Preston Garvey gave us a flare gun. He told us at the time that it wasn't going to be of much use.
You can use it to signal for help from any nearby Minutemen. Not much use yet, but once we have more allied settlements, you'll have help whenever you need it.
And that's, of course, because there weren't any Minutemen to respond to the flare. The flare gun is supposed to signal to Minutemen that you need help. But if we haven't recruited any settlements to the Minutemen, or if we use it outside the visible range of a Minuteman-aligned settlement, then no Minutemen will come. We'll get a message saying that there aren't any settlements in range that can send help. However, if there is a settlement in range, shortly after we send up our flare, we see a responding flare in the sky. And then, a small group of Minutemen arrive.
We saw you flare. Came as quick as we could. Did we miss all the fun?
Minutemen are always ready to help.
I found that it's usually between 3 and 4 people, and they come from whichever settlement is closest. They actually do spawn inside your nearby settlement and physically walk from that settlement to your location. They then linger around next to you. They begin sandboxing, which could be a problem. They might wander into trouble, and if you start moving, they will follow you. But they keep a distance. It's possible that they don't end up helping at all, especially if you're a ranged, stealthy sniper. If you never alert any enemies or you kill them too quickly, the Minutemen just linger around and then walk away. But if enemies see you, if you're discovered, and they begin to advance on your location, then the Minutemen kick into gear. These Minutemen can die, however, but thankfully, even though they physically come from one of your nearby settlements, they're not actually settlers from that settlement. If we follow a group of Minutemen back to the settlement they came from after we summoned them, they just linger around for a little bit. We see that our settlement count has remained the same, and if we come back to the settlement later, those specific Minutemen disappear. So even though the Minutemen can die, we don't have to worry about depleting our nearby settlements by using the flare gun. Sometimes the settlement will already have settlers, and they'll already have structures. These are great because it makes it really easy to plop down beds. But we can't just plop down a bed anywhere. We have to plop down sheltered beds. A bed is only sheltered if it's placed under a roof. Sturgis briefly alludes to this during the tutorial quest.
Just make sure we can sleep with a roof over our heads.
But it's a really important part of the equation, because beds add to the happiness equation of a settlement. A settlement with a low happiness equation could lead to settlers abandoning the settlement. To prevent this, we need to keep settlement happiness high. Every settler has to have a bed. If every settler does have a bed, our settlement gets 10 points to happiness. But if all of the beds are sheltered beds, we get an additional 10 points of happiness for the settlement. If all our settlers have sheltered beds, our settlement gets 20 points of happiness. Some people worry about roofs that have tiny gaps in them, but none of that is taken into account. Anything completely covering the bed, whether it's a roof or even a floor, counts as it being a sheltered bed. Therefore, settlements that come with large pre-existing structures like the Slog are easy to populate with settlers. But some settlements are completely empty when we arrive, like the Starlight Drive-In. After clearing the place, we don't find any settlers there, and there are only a few structures, not enough to grow a settlement. And in that case, we actually have to craft our own buildings. Thankfully, the settlement builder has a bunch of pre-existing structures that we can use to quickly plump down a couple of houses, giving us a place to put our sheltered beds. But even then, a settlement won't grow unless we send out a signal that the settlement is recruiting. To do that, we have to place a settlement recruitment beacon, which requires at least 1 power. Once the settlement recruitment beacon is activated, a new radio station appears on our Pip-Boy.
Attention, Commonwealth residents. Are you looking for a safe place to settle? Home in on these coordinates. If you're willing to work hard, you can make the Commonwealth a better place.
I've found that shortly after placing the settlement recruitment beacon, 1 or 2 settlers will wander into the settlement, and they'll instantly start requiring resources. So it's important to make sure that the settlement can accommodate them first before setting down the recruitment beacon.
Hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. We just wanted to say how grateful we are for the opportunity. So let me know if you have anything you need me to do.
Did you need anything?
I don't think so. Things are actually going pretty good.
Aside from reading the user interface, one way to find out which basic needs a settlement is lacking is to talk to settlers. They're happy to tell us what they need.
Did you need anything?
Well, to be honest, we're a bit short of food. Anything you can do would be appreciated. We need more water. Even another water pump would help.
And sometimes they'll give us radiant quests to give them basic needs. If they lack water, they'll give us a radiant quest to place a water pump. Or if they lack defense, they'll give us a radiant quest to build defenses. And people in the Commonwealth love what the Minutemen are doing. From time to time, they'll stop Preston Garvey just to say thanks.
You're with the Minutemen, right? I'll keep up the good work, okay? We need more people like you.
Thanks. It's good to know. Remember to support your local Minutemen.
You're a real hero. Not many around these days. Here, take this. It's nothing much, but I hope it'll help the cause.
Another part of the settlement system that the game just doesn't tell us is that the number of settlers each settlement can recruit is tied to our character's charisma. The base number of settlers that a settlement can recruit is 10, and then we can recruit one more settler for every point of charisma that we have. In my playthrough, I was using the Commando build by Fudge Muppet. It's a wonderful all-around soldier build. But that build only has 1 charisma, which means that my settler cap for each settlement was 11 settlers. Now, since it's tied to charisma, and our charisma can be altered, we can change this from time to time. For example, if we're wearing clothing that grants us bonuses to charisma, our settlement cap rises as well. And this is important to know because if we've created a structure where every settlement can accommodate only a certain number of settlers, if we start wearing gear that has high charisma, or we start taking chems that improves our charisma, settlers can start to sneak into our settlements now that the settler cap has been raised. And if we don't have beds for them or food for them, our settlement happiness can immediately begin to tank. This happened in my playthrough. Since I only had 1 charisma, my initial plan was to make sure each settlement could accommodate 11 settlers. But as I started to accrue gear that increased my charisma, my settlement started to get 12 settlers, 13 settlers, and I had to go back and work on them to accommodate the new settlers. In addition to having sheltered beds, each settler needs at least 1 food, and the same is true for water. So a settlement with 11 settlers needs 11 food and 11 water. If we don't have enough food or water for all 11 settlers, our settlement happiness is capped at 30. It'll begin to sink until it reaches 30, and it won't grow beyond 30 until we meet the requirement of that settlement. However, if we have enough water and enough food for every single settler, we get a bonus of 20 happiness for that settlement. And finally, we need at least 1 defense for every settler in the settlement. Periodically, our settlements will get attacked. A notification appears on our screen that we need to go and defend one of our settlements. If we ignore the notification and we don't go to the settlement's defense, then the game rolls dice based on our settlement happiness and our settlement defense to see whether the raiders win or the settlers win. If the settlers win, then nothing happens. But if the raiders win, some of the items at our settlement will become destroyed. Our crops or our defense. And without those working crops and defense, our settlement happiness tanks. So it's important to respond to every single alert we get to defend our settlements in person. Additional defense is good, because the higher the defense rating for each settlement, the lower the chance that settlement is going to be raided or attacked in the future. But our chance never goes down to 0. Even if the defense in our settlement is double the number of our settlers, triple, or even quadruple, our settlement's daily chance to get attacked never goes below 2%. So there's always a chance it'll get attacked, and if it does, we have to show up in person. However, if our primary concern is happiness, we only need 1 defense for every settler. If we don't have 1 defense for every settler, our settlement's happiness bonus is capped at 60. But if we do have 1 defense for every settler, we get a bonus 20 happiness for that settlement. If you're counting, that's 20 happiness from defense, 20 from water, 20 from food, 10 from beds, and 10 from sheltered beds, which equals 80 happiness. That's right, the highest our settlement happiness can get by simply meeting the needs of our settlers is 80 happiness. That said, there are a few things we can add to our settlements to increase their happiness. As counterintuitive as it may seem, things like decorations, electricity, lights, patched walls, none of that matters in terms of settlement happiness. If we don't have any DLCs installed, then really the only major way we can improve our settlement happiness further is to create shops. But not all of them do. Weapons and armor shops do not improve a settlement's happiness. The only shops that improve a settlement's happiness are clothing shops, general shops, clinics, and bars. Each of those shops has 3 different tiers: small, medium, or large. Let's assume for the moment that we're just going to go for broke and make the largest shop in each category to maximize our happiness gain. A large clothing shop improves the settlement happiness by 10. A large general shop improves our settlement happiness by 15. Clinics are even better. They improve our settlement happiness by 30. But a bar is the best. One large bar will improve a settlement's happiness by 40. But there's a caveat. Everything we add to a settlement that improves its happiness is divided by the number of settlers that settlement has. So if we only have one large bar in a settlement with 11 people, we only gain an extra 3.6 happiness. You can easily see the problem here. If our goal is to get 100 happiness, we'll have to stuff our settlements with bars. But each bar requires somebody being assigned to the bar in order for it to generate happiness, and many of our settlers are already working on things like farming or defense, which makes getting that 100 happiness really elusive. But shops are not our only option. There is a dog merchant who wanders the Commonwealth who can sell you dogs that you can send to settlements. And dogs improve settlement happiness. But if we have DLCs installed, we thankfully don't have to depend upon randomly finding the dog seller. With Wasteland Workshop, we find an option to trap animals in our settlements. Some animals improve our settlement happiness. There are 3 total. We'll talk about the 3rd much later in this series. Right now we're concerned with dogs and cats. Each cat we capture for a settlement improves our settlement happiness by 10. So does each dog, but dogs also improve our settlement defense. But like with shops, the happiness bonus we get from dogs and cats are divided amongst all settlers. Each dog and each cat grants us plus 10 to happiness. So if we have a settlement with 11 settlers, we're getting less than 1 happiness per pet. Which means that if we want to get the full 10 points of bonus happiness, we need 11 cats or 11 dogs. And remember that our settlement is capped at 80 happiness if we have all of their basic needs met. So to achieve the elusive 100 happiness, we would need 22 animals. 11 dogs and 11 cats, or some mixture of the two. This is doable, but it's tricky, because in order to make a cat trap, we need soft-shell mirelurk meat. And this can be farmed, it just takes a while. In order to make a dog trap, we need canned dog food. The problem with dog food is that it's statically placed throughout the world, and those resources don't renew. So even if we loot every single can of dog food in the Commonwealth, which itself is impractical, we have a set limit of dog traps that we could make. The only other way to get dog food is to find it for sale on a merchant's inventory, which is of course random. To make this even worse, placing a dog trap doesn't guarantee that we'll actually trap a guard dog. Sometimes we'll trap mongrels, and once we release them from the cage, they start attacking everyone in the settlement. If that happens, we not only have to kill the mongrel, but we have to repair the dog trap, which consumes even more resources. The good news is that once we trap a guard dog or a cat, we can scrap the traps at that settlement, which gives us some of the resources back, including some of the dog food and some of the soft-shell mirelurk meat that we can then use to build traps in other settlements. There are a few other things to note. Another unspoken rule is that our settlement will only recruit new settlers if we have fewer than 5 unassigned settlers. So if we have 7 settlers, for example, 2 are assigned to farming, but the other 5 are unassigned, then that settlement won't grow. We have to physically go back to that settlement and assign them to defense or to something else in order to recruit new settlers, so that we can meet our charisma cap. If all our settlement's needs are met, we have a 60% chance every recruitment cycle to recruit a new settler or even a Brahmin to the settlement. Or we can always put down a Brahmin trap using razor grain as bait to make sure each of our settlements gets at least one Brahmin. And Brahmin produce fertilizer. One of the resources we can place down is a scrap resource, and if we assign a settler to a scrap resource, that settlement will generate scrap each day. Shops will generate caps, but there are limits to the resources each settlement can generate. The maximum number of food each settlement can hold until our settlement stops producing food is 21. For water, it's 8. For scrap, it's 155. For fertilizer, it's 10. And for caps, it's 50. Once we reach that cap, even if we have settlers assigned to those resources, the settlement will stop producing those resources. Finally, we can talk about provisioners. There are some settlements we get that have a lot of room for growing crops, some that even have established farms when we get them, like Abernathy Farm or the Green Top Nursery. There are other settlements that have hardly any room to grow crops, like Hangman's Alley. This gives us the impression that if we were to establish trade routes, that is, supply lines between each of the settlements, that we could use one settlement as a food production settlement and use another settlement for something else. And we can do that. However, provisioners aren't taken into consideration when happiness is calculated. Even if you have your settlement's food supply being fulfilled by some other farm along the trade route, those settlers will still have a penalty to happiness unless their settlement itself is growing the food necessary to meet the daily needs of each settler. Which essentially means that trade routes, when it comes to happiness, are meaningless. Trade routes are good for other reasons. With a trade route established, you can access the scrap from any connected settlement to the trade route when building at any settlement connected to the trade route, which makes it useful to do. However, we have to specialize into the local leader perk in order to unlock provisioners, which we may not want to do depending on our build. If all of this sounds confusing, and it is, don't worry, many years ago, I created a settlement happiness calculator using Google Sheets. I'm going to link to it in the description below. Using this calculator, you can punch in all of the details for your settlement, settlers, food, water, etc., in order to better plan your settlement if you want to reach that elusive 100 happiness. But maybe you don't want 100 happiness. Maybe you're perfectly satisfied with 80 happiness per settlement. And that's totally fine. There's no gameplay drawback to having only 80 happiness per settlement. But for this story, I really wanted to get 100 happiness per settlement. And so since I didn't have the local leader perk, and I couldn't build shops or establish trade routes, each of my settlements has a lot of pets. The settlement system in Fallout 4 is incredibly frustrating. It's not documented well. There are a lot of things that you need to know that it just doesn't tell you. And using it is like pulling teeth. There are arbitrary rules about where you can place things and how things fit together that just don't make any sense, making it difficult without using mods or console commands to build the settlement of your dreams. When new settlers join a settlement, they'll auto-assign themselves to food gathering, and they'll auto-assign themselves a bed. But not always. There were some situations where I would arrive at a settlement, and even though the settlement was full of settlers, none of the beds were assigned, and I had to manually assign each and every settler to their beds. Only then did that settlement gain happiness. And there's a fundamental glitch in the settlement system in Fallout 4. As Nate wanders the Commonwealth, the way the game engine works is it creates a bubble around your character and only loads in whatever item enters that bubble. When you're in a settlement and you're building there, usually everything in the settlement loads in correctly because everything is within that bubble. But sometimes when you wander outside of your settlement or you fast travel to a location near to a settlement, only a third or half of that settlement will actually load in. And in those situations, the game engine thinks that your settlement is incomplete. In those situations, it might tell you that you have half the beds that you really do, half the settlers that you really do, half the food and water that your settlement really has. Thankfully, all of that information is still there, but for the purposes of happiness calculation, you still get penalized as if your settlement was incomplete, and the only way to fix it is to travel back to the settlement and open the settlement build menu to force the game to recalibrate itself, to correctly count all of the resources that you've painstakingly built for your settlers. And despite this, it's one of the most rewarding building mechanics I've ever played in a game, and I think this is because we actually get to see the benefits of our labor. We get to see our settlements grow. We get to interact with the settlers. We get to see them use the beds and the machines that we've placed down for them. Despite its frustrations at times, it's still a highly rewarding system to interact with. Even all these years later, after making my dream settlements in other game saves, I found myself getting lost in building each and every one of these settlements, and I had an enormously good time. I figured it would be nice to show off some of the settlements I built for this series. Since I didn't use mods and I didn't use console commands to exceed the settlement build limit, I was really limited with what I could do, because we are limited with what we can do in the base game. For Sanctuary Hills, I decided to recreate Sanctuary the way it looks in the ending slides of Fallout 4. For all of the other settlements, I just wanted to make sure that my settlers' basic needs were met and that the settlement itself looked realistic. I used existing structures whenever possible. I only scrapped things around the settlement if it got in the way of building. I wanted each settlement to look like it was part of a wasteland, that the people living there were still scraping to get by. I used the basic vanilla metal and wood structures for most of the settlements, but I ventured into some of the options we get with DLCs where I felt it was appropriate. For example, at Nordhagen Beach, I used the workshop and farmhouse toolkits that we got from Far Harbor to create a nice dock. And for Oberland Station, since it was close to the train tracks, I used the train car toolkit that we got from the Contraptions Workshop DLC to craft some train cars that the settlers used as homes. Here's a little before and after montage of some of the settlements I built for this series. The story of the Minutemen picks up again after we've claimed and established at least 4 settlements. Slowly, over time, settlement by settlement, we begin to grow the Minutemen. Even at this point, with only 4 settlements claimed and founded, when they're fully occupied, that's 44 settlers. That's 44 soldiers in the Minutemen. We can see how quickly the Minutemen can grow in the Commonwealth. 4 settlements becomes 8. That's 88 soldiers in the Minutemen. There are 37 total settlements we can claim for the Minutemen when all DLCs are included. If we had 11 settlers at every single settlement, that's 407 soldiers. That's a huge army. And it makes what the Minutemen are trying to achieve in the Commonwealth much more realistic. In our next episode, we'll see what happens once we claim and settle our 4th settlement. I publish new videos in this series each and every week, so if you don't want to miss it, be sure to subscribe. If you like what I do and you want to support me, one of the best things you can do is become a member. If you want to support me in another way, you can become a patron on Patreon. You could buy my plush, or you could purchase something from my shop. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're watching this video with me today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon with the next episode and the full story of the Minutemen.